Welcome into Daily Faceoff Live, your go-to source for everything hockey. Live every weekday at noon Eastern.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into a Wednesday, November 30th edition of Daily Faceoff Live. We're streaming live on Twitter, YouTube, as well as, of course, dailyfaceoff.com. He's former NHL netminder, current Daily Faceoff analyst, Mike McKenna. Mike, what a way to close out November. A 17-goal game we had last night in the NHL, a broadcaster going off and fat-shaming a player, and really some quality other games and lots to dig into.
Yeah, and the Coyotes are closer to getting a new arena. I can't think of anything more that's going on in the league right now, man. It was a pretty wild Tuesday evening we saw.
Yeah, let's unpack it all. Let's throw 2 minutes and 30 seconds up on the clock, and let's start with that wild 17-goal affair. In case you missed it, late last night in the East, if you were sleeping, Seattle Kraken 9, Los Angeles Kings 8. It was 3-3 after 1, 8-6 after 2, and it ends up, of course, in overtime. The 17 goals scored. That's only the 12th time in the last 35 years in the NHL that's happened and hit that many goals in a single game. If you had the over, you were sleeping pretty comfortably after 1 last night. And it's one of those games, when you look at it, Mike, wow, I mean, lots of different points piled up by a number of different players. But when you slice it all down, what do you see from that game? And if you're the goalies in net, specifically Martin Jones, what are you feeling?
Well, not very good after the game. You just allowed 8, but you're thankful that you at least won. I mean, we saw a cornucopia of plays across the board. That how many of these should end up in the net? Was the goaltending great? No. Was the defensive coverage great? No. Jonathan Quick lasted 5 goals. I think if you're Martin Jones, you just look at this and go, man, I'm glad that one is over, because sometimes, Frank, these games take on a life of their own for the players, for everybody involved, and you're on the bench and it starts going back and forth. It's 5-6, 6-5. I've been in those games, and you can just never predict what's going to happen next. It's tough to make a save. Jones was the first goalie since 1991 to allow 8 goals in a game and come out victorious. And I mean, for me, I think, Frank, it's just all boils down to this. It was a great call from John Forsland, the most unusual night you'll ever see. And I think in 2022, to see a game with 17 goals, that's pretty accurate.
Yeah, pretty wild. I mean, Kevin Fiala and Jordan Eberle each with 4-point nights. 23 different players of the 36 skaters that were on the ice registered at least 1 point. What does this do for the Kraken, who have now beaten the Kings in 3 games to start the season? What does that do for them in the standings?
Well, I mean, the Kraken now, you look at where they're headed to. Like, this team is looking more and more like a playoff club, at least in terms of their wins and their points. But, Frank, can they really do it defensively? I've had questions about it. I said yesterday in my goalie matchup that on Daily Faceoff, I had Quick against Jones. I thought this was going to be a high-scoring game. So I guess I was prophetic, but
a goalie matchup of a different kind.
Right. Like an exciting one at that. I just think, though, that Seattle is pretty resilient. They're finding ways, like the names of people that are putting points up. Burakovsky had another 2 goals. Matty Beniers on a point streak. McCann, Eberle. There's players on Seattle that are performing at a really high level here, Frank. If they can tighten up defensively, I think this is looking like a playoff team. We just need to see it down the stretch.
Yeah, I'm just not convinced with the teams that are behind them in the Pacific Division, and also really the lack of star power that the Kraken have. They have one that's growing into becoming a star in Matty Beniers. He's a fantastic player, but he's not a star just yet, even though he's on the path. And I think they're kind of missing that up front, in addition to some of the deficiencies that you're talking about defensively. Let's talk about another game that ended in overtime last night, and that would be for controversy of a different reason. The Carolina Hurricanes knocked off the Pittsburgh Penguins at PPG Paints Arena, and it was controversial because of this hit right here that ended up leading to the goal. The Penguins calling the hit dangerous, saying that the hit from behind was certainly not warranted. There was no penalty called on the play. And Mike, what strikes me about how weird this sequence was that the Penguins just kind of stopped playing. Have you ever seen that happen before, especially in overtime, where it's like, there's a game going on here, and although you might have not liked the hit, you got to keep playing.
Yeah, and I've seen players go for retribution previously, but not to allow a 2-on-0 going the other direction, Frank. To me, the real culprit of this is that Pittsburgh had too many men on the ice prior to this hit. Jeff Petrie hopped on early for Brian Dumoulin, and then when Rust skated back towards the Penguins' net, you can see he kind of freaks out because he sees two other black and yellow jerseys. And that's what makes him stop and think for a split second and opens him up to that hit by Jarvis. And I mean, I've watched the hit over and over again. It wasn't a great hit because Jarvis did make contact from behind, but he's going through to the puck. He's trying to get the puck first and foremost, and then Rust turns. So, like, if you're the Penguins, you've got to be aware 3-on-3, and especially if you're Jeff Petrie, like, you're a defenseman. You're supposed to be the last line of defense. Dumoulin's just come off, and you're at the blue line. You got to be aware that if you go after Jarvis, you're opening your team up to that type of scoring chance if there's no call or whistle. It's an all-in play. And I know teammates appreciate it, but you like 2 points better than you do trying to attack a player after a game.
Yeah, you can see Mike Sullivan, the Penguins coach, is absolutely incensed after this hit. I'm with you. Like, of all the hits that we've seen that have been questionable at times, like, this one is borderline, but it's certainly not anywhere near among the most egregious that we've seen to think that play is going to absolutely grind to a halt. Fair or unfair?
I agree. I just think that this wasn't a good hit. Okay, like, Jarvis has definitely got a responsibility not to hit somebody with their letter, with the numbers facing them. But Rust isn't along the boards when it first starts to occur and he goes through the puck. It's just,
he also
like,
turns
you got to
him.
keep playing. Yeah, like, you got to keep playing. Like, was this a penalty that, or could Jarvis have been penalized? I can't speak today. Absolutely, I think this could have been a penalty, but you got to put that on the referees and keep playing the game. You can't. It's just like if a goalie, you think the goalie's got the puck covered, Frank, and you stop playing and you find out it's free. It's the same thing to me. Play until the whistle.
Another point lost for the Pittsburgh Penguins, who could absolutely use them as they chase down a team like Carolina, who has a 3-point edge in the Metropolitan Division standings. Let's talk about the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame. Their induction ceremony goes tonight in Minnesota, November 30th, to close out. It's a Hall of Fame, Mike, class that doesn't receive a lot of love in terms of the notoriety. It's not the same as going into the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto, but still equally as impressive of an honor for your career. And this is quite a class when you look at it. The first ever disabled athlete in Steve Cash going into the Hall of Fame. You've got the Lamoureux twins, who were such huge pillars for U.S. women's hockey and really led that program through some of the glory years. Ryan Miller in net, and you can speak to his impact, but Jim Johansson, wanted to give a little love to him as well. JJ was such a big part of everything that happened at USA Hockey for the last couple decades before his still shocking and untimely passing. And I thought Brian Burke, who was the GM of the 2010 Olympic team that was oh so close to beating Canada for the gold medal in Vancouver, he told a story to NHL.com's Mike Morial, who basically he relayed the fact that after the Crosby golden goal goes in, everyone's sort of sitting around talking about how unbelievable the game was and still trying to digest the U.S. loss. And there, Brian Burke tells the story all the time of him walking into that locker room after the game saying, to the video coach, even before they were going out to get their medals, I need to see that play again. I need to see it over and over and over again to understand exactly what Sidney Crosby did and where he put that puck. And as they were still digesting it over a beer after the game, there was Jim Johansson in the locker room helping the equipment managers tape up sticks, saying, hey, we've got guys going back to NHL teams on the first flight out at 6 a.m. tomorrow. We need to help them get prepared so they can go back to their team. He said, we're still all trying to figure out what just happened. And he's moving on to the next thing, just trying to help the equipment manager as the guy who's in charge of the entire operation. Says a lot about Jim Johansson, says a lot about his impact on USA Hockey over the last number of years. If you haven't read Mike Morial's story on NHL.com, urge you to do so about Jim Johansson, someone that we still miss. And certainly from the players that spoke in the piece, Patrick Kane and many other stars had a big impact on their careers and their interest in playing hockey as well.
Johansson had time for everybody, Frank. I remember in 2013, he called me to ask if I could play for the U.S. team at the World Championships. And I had to decline because my first daughter was set to be born right in the middle of it. And I told Jim, I've never wanted to do anything more in my career than wear the U.S. jersey. This is tops of my list, but I can't miss this. And then a couple of years later in 2017, he called me again and said, hey, Mike, I remembered what you said. and I don't know what your contract status is yet because it was ahead of free agency that summer. And he said, but we're putting you on the testing list for the Olympic team. We want to make sure that you have some interest and know what could be possible. And it blew me away that he remembered that conversation first off. And I was incredibly honored to even be in the mix there. And I talked to my friend Nick Petraglia, who has done a lot of stuff with USA Hockey, Frank, and he said that you wouldn't find anybody who is more beloved and respected within USA Hockey. And he has his fingerprints all over how hockey has grown in the United States, and just a truly top shelf, humble, genuine human being, Jim Johansson.
Well said. And if you haven't gotten a chance to visit the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame in the small town of Eveleth, Minnesota, please get out and do so. It's actually a really cool stop along the hockey trail. Also, some news coming from Tempe, Arizona on Tuesday evening. A Tempe City Council meeting was held, and City Council voted 7-0 in favor of having the Coyotes move forward with their arena proposal. A big win for the Coyotes, but they're not there quite yet in terms of getting really putting steel and shovels in the ground yet for their arena in Tempe, their permanent home, as they're playing temporarily now at the Arizona State University's Mullet Arena. But in this case, they're facing a May 16th referendum in which the public can come out and vote and decide once and for all whether or not Tempe decides to move forward with this bold proposal that includes $2.1 billion in bonds that must be sold. These are unrated bonds, meaning that it's a little bit of a tougher sell for some larger corporations and entities that might pile money into something like this. So still certainly some risk and some ways to go, but this is good news for the Coyotes in Arizona.
Definitely. I mean, it shows that the Tempe City Council is seemingly behind this proposal. I mean, you got a chance to turn a landfill into a landmark, like they've said. That's a good deal, I think, and it'd be a great, obviously, win for the Coyotes. But, you know, with these types of things, Frank, it's these public-private partnerships, when they get together, like you look at the amount of money that's going to come out of the public, it's $209 to $229 million public money when it comes to roads and other things. That's a lot on top of the bonds that you're talking about included in that $2.1 billion. So you can never really tell how taxpayers are going to go. But I think across the board in hockey, we're all hoping this works out because the Coyotes have agreed with this deal. Gary Bettman said that they'd bring an all-star game. They'd bring a draft out to Arizona. Of course, no kidding, Gary. Who wants to come out to Arizona in the middle of winter? I think just about everybody. But the key piece here, Frank, there's a 30-year non-relocation agreement that the Coyotes are willing to sign when this deal gets done. It is a permanent home for this club and one that should be a home run if Tempe gets it done. I think we all in hockey just have to hope that the taxpayers and the voters agree with it.
Yeah, and a big reason why this team has remained in the desert for so long has been the support of the NHL, and that support was on display again on Tuesday evening. The NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman, as well as Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly, flew out specifically just for the City Council meeting to speak there, and then also hold a media availability before then getting on a plane back to New York and getting home, I think around 3 a.m. local time when it was all said and done. Big move for the NHL to be there, and Gary Bettman, of course, also handled himself quite well when dealing with some protesters outside of the City Council meeting. Take a listen.
Playboy, say no to hockey in Tempe. Tell you what, how about we have a discussion right on please, okay? Please, protect essential employees. Give me a few minutes with the media, and then we can talk all you want. Thank you. Okay, that was good. Good job. Your question. Your confidence.
The NHL commissioner handling himself quite well against protesters, saying, hey, how about we talk about this one-on-one after I get done speaking to the media? Love to see that. Let's get to Ryan Pinder to talk Calgary Flames and Matthew Tkachuk's return. That's right. Pleased to welcome to Daily Faceoff Live, Ryan Pinder of Barn Burner, which you can see every weekday, Monday to Friday, 10:30 a.m. Mountain Time, alongside Dean Boomer Molberg and the Retster himself, Rhett Warner, talking all things Calgary Flames and just about everything else. This segment is delivered by DoorDash. Ryan, got to talk. Want to ask you, what do you make of the reception that Matthew Tkachuk got? A standing ovation when his tribute video, the return video, was played, a chance to thank the fans, but also a healthy amount of boos the first time he touched the puck when he was back at the Dome for the first time, this time as a member of the Florida Panthers. Did fans get it right?
I think they nailed it, to be honest, Frank. I think, you want the player to do well, but not tonight. That was the gist of what I took from that. It was a huge amount of applause for him during the tribute that they had at a stoppage. He was on the ice. He recognizes the fans, big standing O, and then continually touches the puck the next shift. Boos, laughter, fans understanding the irony of cheering and booing the same guy within, seconds, and then more boos as he kept touching it. And I think that kind of that suits Calgary fans, and I think that's the way that made sense here. He was a great Calgary Flame. He didn't screw them. He was honest with them. And to be fair, they want him to do well. They liked what he did as a Flame. He was one of the highest picks in franchise history, had a great run with the Flames. Be great, just not tonight, you jerk, right? That was kind of the gist of it.
I think he probably embraced it. I mean, knowing Tkachuk's style, I'm sure he expected to hear some of those boos, and that, really it means you're loved. It means that you did a good job while you were there and appreciated. And yeah, they're mad you left. What's with this Flames team though? Okay, like they've been so Jekyll and Hyde. They haven't been able to score on the road. Goaltending's been hit or miss, and obviously there was a lot of roster turnover this offseason. But can a team really just be out of sync 2 months into the season? Is it as simple as that, or is there more to it?
Well, I think if I asked you what a Daryl Sutter hockey team would look like, people can close their eyes and know what that is. They haven't really looked like one for a lot of their opening quarter of the season. So last night, maybe a step in that right direction, but then also they got up 3-0 early, and it's kind of like, well, you can kind of throw out the results after 3-0, hockey being what it is. But I would suggest goaltending will be better, and maybe Vladar gets a bit of a run here. Mike, I'd love your thoughts on the tandem. But more than that, there's been just egregious, sloppy turnovers and dumb plays in their own zone. That I would expect to see less of. Is this going to be a high-octane offense? No. But this is probably a team that you should expect to be amongst the best at goals against, shots against, and penalty kill. And they really haven't been to this point of the season. That's where this team has to improve. And to be fair, aside from Rasmus Andersson and Noah Hannafin, all the other defensemen have been moving around, churning with different bodies. They've missed three of their top 6 at times this year. They've gone all the way down to 9 on the depth chart for defense. They're finally getting healthier there. If they could get an Oliver Shillington back, that wouldn't hurt, but I don't know that anyone's counting on that. That's a huge mystery at this point where he's at, if there's any sort of timeline for his return or not. But I would expect to see them look more like a Daryl Sutter team moving forward. And through 20, they haven't, but Uyghur's moving in the right direction, as is Huberdeau, and I don't think there's any concern about Kadri.
Ryan, I think it would be great for the Flames to get some clarity on Shillington, and I think they're hoping to get some of that in the next couple of weeks here to really figure out what this defense core looks like moving forward. But behind the defense, I wanted to ask about Dan Vladar, and I thought it was really curious to me coming back off a long road trip. Vladar gets the start. I think it was his 3rd in the last 4 games. He looked pretty good and made some really key saves, I think, especially on some quality chances in the first period to keep the Flames in front. What do you make of the decision to go with Vladar to kick off this long homestand? And could you see an extended run for him as Jacob Markstrom has faltered a bit this season?
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me, and it wasn't surprising to see him go. He's been the better goalie the last couple of weeks. That road trip, he was better than Markstrom. Markstrom has got a little bit better, but there's just that one a game that leaves you thinking, geez, like, is this the guy that finished second in Vezina voting? How can that be? But I don't think it's a bad thing for Markstrom or Sutter. If you can get good goaltending, ride a hot hand, and get rest and an ultra-motivated Markstrom, that might be the best thing for this team in the long run. And I would argue the best season Markstrom's had wasn't necessarily last year where he had all those shutouts early and then was okay down the stretch. It was when he had a more of a platoon type setup with Thatcher Demko in Vancouver his final year there. I guess the pandemic altered season there, but that was sensational stuff in front of or behind a bad blue line, in my opinion. That might be his best year, and it wasn't loading him up with all the starts. It was competition. So I think this could work really well for the Flames, and I think it took a while for Daryl to trust Dan Vladar. He only had 6 games in the NHL before last year, and it went like over a month between starts at one point last year. But I think he's there now. He's performed well enough. They really like him internally in their goaltending department. Why not let him have a run? If he wants to be great and string some wins together, they'll take it at this point.
Yeah, I think wins was the key stat that you just mentioned. That was just Vladar's 2nd win of the season coming last night. And for a guy that had only won despite playing pretty well, That's the critical stat for the Flames moving forward, as they've got some catch-up work to do in the Pacific Division standings. Thanks so much to Ryan Pinder for this week's edition of the All 32 to talk Calgary Flames. As mentioned, you can watch Barn Burner Monday to Friday, 10:30 a.m. Mountain Time. They follow us immediately. Head on over to the Nation Network YouTube channel if you haven't already, and hit the subscribe button. Thanks to Ryan for this All 32 delivered by DoorDash. You see the promo code there at the bottom of your screen. Game Day 25 gets you 25% off and free delivery on your first order of $15 or more on the DoorDash app. All your favorites and more delivered right to your door by DoorDash. Thanks, Pinder.
See you guys. Thanks.
All right, Mike, time for our daily face-off inbox question of the day. Hit us up on Twitter, hashtag AskDFO. And after the Winnipeg Jets shut out the Colorado Avalanche by a 5-0 score on Tuesday evening, my question to you is this: does Connor Hellebuyck need to win the Vezina Trophy in order for the Jets to win the Central?
Oh, I tell you, I went back and forth. I'm going to say no. Because I think the Jets, they've been an okay team, and Hellebuyck has unquestionably outperformed what they've been able to accomplish internally just as a forward scoring unit. But I think realistically, there's only one goalie out of 32 that wins the Vezina. I think if Connor Hellebuck's even a finalist for it, the Jets could potentially challenge. It's going to be tough, though, with Colorado coming. What do you think, Frank?
Yeah, I'm going to say yes. I think for Connor Hellebuyck with the Jets team that is, I think, a solid team, and we've all liked the way this team has been put together based on you and I on our projections for that team and expectations last season, which they did not fulfill. But the thing that stands out from last season is that Connor Hellebuyck wasn't very good, wasn't himself, and was probably hard on himself. So he wasn't up to the Hellebuyck Vezina level standard. I think he finished with a .908 save percentage last year. If he's in that territory again, I don't think the Jets make the playoffs this year, despite how well they've started. And if he continues at .925, .928, if he's in the 930s and he's winning that Vezina, then I think they've got a great shot to do so. So I'm going to say yes, Hellebuyck needs to win the Vezina in order for the Jets to win the Central. Let's get to our daily face-off Pointsbet daily bet segment with Tyler Remchuk. And Tyler, a perfect night. Where'd this come from?
Frank, it was a perfect 3 for 3 last night, so it feels good to finally win one. So let's hope we can keep that rolling this evening. And a pretty short NHL slate, but our friends at PointsBet Canada have all the odds up. And let's start with that matchup at the bottom. I love the Oilers in this game. They are plus 110 on the puck line, and Chicago, pretty much all they've been doing is lose by 2 or more goals. They have failed to cover that puck line in 6 of their last 7 games. I like Edmonton to extend their winning streak to 3 games and cover the puck line in the process. I also have a couple of props for this evening, and I'm heading out to the Detroit versus Buffalo game. I like Alex Tuch to pick up an apple. The payout is very good at plus 135. He's hit this in 3 of his last 5 games with 2 multi-assist games in that span as well. He's got 12 and 22 games on the season, and while the Sabres haven't been winning a lot, they actually have been scoring a lot. So I like Alex Tuch on that Sabres top line to pick up an apple. And to wrap things up, yes, I do have another shot prop. The payout on this one is not great, but it's an auto bet for me right now. And it's Dylan Larkin over 2.5 shots on goal. He's crushing this thing. Hit it in 4 of his last 5. Hit it in 9 of his last 10 as well. I like Larkin to go over 2.5 shots this evening as my third and final play, Frank.
Tyler, the shot prop king. I don't know if I agree with taking Larkin at minus 190 there. A pretty hefty price, but we'll see if it pays off for him. Coming off of a perfect night. Hard to doubt him, Mike. That brings us to garbage time. And usually I cede the floor to you, but in this case, wanted to take it myself because I'm so tired of hearing Boston Bruins broadcaster Jack Edwards continue to talk. Take a listen for his latest gem, if you want to call it that, on Tuesday night during a key matchup for the Boston Bruins against the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Listed at 238 pounds. That was day 1 of training camp. I got a feeling he's had a few more pizzas between then and now.
Yeah, that's before pregame.
Yeah, right. Fasting. Chris, inadvertent fasting for Pat Maroon is like 4 hours without a meal. But hey, 3 cups in a row. Who can argue with his formula?
As if Jack Edwards throwing in the disclaimer at the end, 3 Stanley Cups, who's to argue with his formula, like that's going to save him. By the way, it's not inadvertent fasting. It's called intermittent fasting. Not sure if Jack Edwards knew that, but in this case, why? That's my big question. We have a game going on, a fantastic game between 2 division rivals with a lot on the line, and you want to make fun or fat shame a 3-time Stanley Cup winner who's a professional athlete. So I had the as I mentioned this on Twitter earlier today, the social media Illuminati coming after me saying, "Oh, you must feel seen as someone who's overweight and has gray hair." Like, okay, yeah, like that means anything to me. My point is, this is unnecessary. This is the same guy in Jack Edwards that had the "he crashed harder than Hobie Baker" line from however long ago. He should have been gone then. He's way past his point of expiration now. Move on. Jack Edwards, go do something else. Go home, Jack. You actually sounded drunk in the clip.
I just think about Patrick Waugh and Jeremy Roenick. The famous clip of, I couldn't hear what he said because I had my Stanley Cup ring plugging my ear. That's all I can think about. I mean, Frank, I've known Pat for a long time, and I know how hard he's had to work to get where he is and continue to work to be there. If you've ever seen him train, if you've ever seen him skate in the summer, the guy's an absolute animal in what he does, and he's earned those Stanley Cups.
Yeah, not only has he earned it, but as you mentioned, he's also struggled with his weight his entire life. This is nothing new. Mm-hmm. This rolls off of him like water off of a duck's back, just like it would me. But if you're calling a professional athlete fat, how does someone else sitting at home that is actually overweight feel when they hear something like that? For whatever reason, we've had this sort of awakening in 2022, and I'm not here to be a woke broadcaster or anything like that, and certainly not into cancel culture, but it seems like weight discrimination is the last acceptable form of discrimination out there where people don't bat an eye at it. And I'm just tired of it. It was an unnecessary jab during a game when you could have gone in a million different directions. But I expect nothing less from Jack Edwards, who just time and time again seems to throw any sort of moral standing out the window, because whether it's yelling at a player to get up, moron, or something like that after a play, he only knows to call the game one way, and I just think we're way beyond that. Let's move on to something different. So that'll do it for today's edition of Daily Faceoff Live. I'll step off of my soapbox now. Thanks to Ryan Pinder, thanks to Tyler Yaremchuk, as well as Mike McKenna, and our head of production, Alex Lar. We'll be back 12 noon Eastern on Thursday. You know where to find us. Until then, have a great day and enjoy the 4-game slate tonight, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to Daily Faceoff Live. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode.